Hello, everyone, and welcome to Real Estate Right Now, where we talk about real estate matters that matter to you. My name is Jay Izzo, and we are live here from Linda Craft Team Studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina, part of the Greater Research Triangle Park. Today's show is one that everybody's going to be interested in. I don't care where you live. We're here in the Research Triangle Park. As of August 6th, there's going to be some major changes in the real estate world. For the rest of you in the United States, it's going to be officially August 17th. But we're going to prepare you for probably what will be coming near you. The fact of the matter is real estate as we knew it is going to change. It is not going to be the same. In fact, there's going to be new forms that you're going to see, whether you're buying or selling a home. And this is all due to the NAR settlement. And we've got a lot to explain, but I am not the master to do that. So what we did is we brought in the expert, right? CEO, President of Linda Craft Team Realtors. Linda Craft is here to join us to help us understand what is about to change. Not that these are the final changes, because this is pretty fluid. Things can be continually changing. We don't know how this is all going to work out. But right now, this is what we know, and this is what we're going to share with you today. So, Linda, welcome back to Real Estate Right Now.
Thank you, Jay, for having me. And hello, everybody that's watching. Thank you so much. Yeah, we do have a lot of stuff going on. And what is so interesting is that this has been happening for a year. In the news, blowing up about this lawsuit with NAR. And yet the surveys are saying that only 30% know what's coming. So in our triangle area, the big change starts August 5th. Although nationwide, all 50 states, the change has to be executed before or on August 17th, as Jay mentioned. So what is the change? I just want to run through it really quickly. There was a major lawsuit a year ago that we finally settled or reached an agreement on, I'll say part one, because I think there's more to come, with the National Association of Realtors. And in that agreement, the Department of Justice decided that they would accept three things from us and we can continue to do business as we've always done. And those three things were, first of all, we have to have a written agreement that details out what the compensation is going to be for a realtor's professional fees for both sellers and buyers. Well, the great news is North Carolina has been doing full disclosure transparency in writing since the mid-90s. So we're way ahead of the rest of the USA. The second part was that we can no longer advertise any type of compensation in MLS. And the way it is now is our MLS is our database where we put all of our homes for sale. And through that database, we allow Zillow and other websites to push them out to home buyers. It's great advertising. But at the bottom of every sheet, there is compensation about how much the seller's listing firm is willing to compensate a buyer agent in cooperation to show the property and to sell it. So that is going away. There will be no communication in MLS any longer about what the compensation is. And even if a seller wanted to offer more compensation to the buyer agent or pay buyer closing costs or anything like that, all that comes out of MLS. So it's going to make it a little more challenging as far as communication. We literally will not know before we make an appointment to show a house whether or not the seller is compensating or how the professional real estate agent is going to be paid in that transaction. So going to need a lot of communication. That's happening here in the Triangle, North Carolina on August 5th. Again, other MLSs are following suit, has to be done by August 17th. So when a buyer calls and they want to see a home and a realtor says to them, I cannot show you this home unless you first sign a contract with me and agree to pay me if the seller is not. Well, most likely a buyer is going to be like, yikes, what? Are you crazy? I never heard of such a thing. Because remember, only 30% of the U.S. knows what's happening out there. So there's going to be shock and horror and confusion. By the way, if you call an office after August 17th and you ask to see a house and that realtor says, sure, what time do you want to see it? They're committing malpractice. That is not somebody you want to work with. You want a real estate professional. And then besides a written agreement and coming out of MLS, what was the third thing? Jay, I can't even remember now. There's so much. Oh gosh, third thing.
So,
what was it?
So what we're covering is there's the written agreements. Can't show a house without agreement to represent and compensate.
And basically no MLS any longer telling you what
Right.
that compensation is. So
Mhm.
we're out there in no man's land. So these are major changes for the industry. They, in my personal opinion, they are going to hurt buyers and sellers because the seller wants their home to be marketed, and the seller wants you to be able to get in and show it quickly, and that is going to have some definite pause in it. And we've had a few solutions that we're coming up with, but we'll talk about that later.
All right, so let's dig into some of what's going on here with the settlement. Let's not call it a lawsuit; it's a settlement. I know that originated there, but it's really truly a settlement, and it is ongoing. We're not done. We
No.
don't know, but here's some of the specific things, right? So this is going to be a challenge. Written agreements are going to be a challenge because these are going to be things that people have never seen before, and because they've never seen before, and you I think correctly said, oh, they're going to be a pushback of going, oh my gosh, I don't know that I want to sign this, but it will be, and I think this is what is so important, is that an agent cannot show a house.
Right. They cannot unlock a home and
Right.
walk you through that home to see that home unless you have first committed to that agent
Right.
and committed to paying a fee. And so in a way that's good, because what's going to happen now with home buyers, hopefully quickly, is they've always gotten pre-approved before they looked at a home. But now they need to interview the realtor that they want to represent them in the largest financial investment they're probably ever going to make in their life. And they're not just going to hire somebody that opens the door. And in fact, when you hire a real estate professional, you're hiring them for what they know and what they know how to do. They negotiate for you. There is an incredible process that takes place to be able to go from looking at a house and actually getting the keys and owning it. And you're paying a real estate professional for their knowledge to guide you to what is a good investment. And so there's so much more. And I think that's going to be the real positive, is that buyers will start to interview realtors and make wise selections about who represents them. But in that interim, where the other 70% of the world figures out what's happening, and the game has changed, the rules of the game has changed, they're going to really be frustrated.
Okay, so let's as we think about buyers, and I think it is going to be a little bit of a struggle for a buyer, but let's play this scenario out just a little bit here. In that, okay, a buyer is now going to have to sign a buyer's agreement, which we've always done pretty much in the state of North Carolina.
But not before we showed the first house.
Right.
The only thing we had to do in North Carolina when we showed the first house was present a working with real estate agent brochure that talked about agency and who represents who, and give them the option to whether or not they want to work with you or they don't. But now it will be a contract, and that's a scary thing, right?
Okay, well, so then let's play this out. So there's going to be a compensation agreement that you're going to have to sign as a buyer. And let's say you're going to look at this house and you want to purchase this home. Now, when does the buyer know if the seller is offering may or may not be offering some sort of compensation?
Yeah, so right now we know what the compensation is before we ever arrive at the home. With our office, if they call to see one of our listings, we literally have already created a system in place where we click on a button and we can see, not in MLS because it's not there anymore, but in our personal office, we can see if our sellers are actually offering to compensate. So we know what that is, and we can disclose that to the buyer when we meet them at the house. We created a one-time showing agreement because we do not want our sellers to be hurt, nor do we want to make buyers mad. And in that one-time showing agreement, I had it approved by a North Carolina real estate attorney, the North Carolina Association of Realtors attorney, and the MLS to make sure that it was in compliance. And so when a buyer calls our office now and they want to see a property, we're going to be able to send that to them in advance to let them know that, hey, if you decide to buy this home, our firm is being compensated by the seller. You don't have to pay our professional fees for representation. It's being done by the seller, and this is what it is. And the agreement then would be just one-time showing for that property only. They're not hiring us, we're not asking them to marry us for the next 6 months to a year and force them to buy a home from us. It's just an opportunity to see a home. And that is a beautiful thing because it really does protect the seller. The seller wants us to be able to show that property and present it. And then the other thing that we're really encouraging buyers to do right now is to visit open houses. When they go to an open house, they don't have to sign a commitment to that realtor that's there. That realtor is there representing the seller. And so you can just walk in. And so start attending more open houses. If you go to lindacraft.com on the homepage, you literally can click on a button that says open house, and it will show you every open house that's happening, even new construction in the Triangle area. So visit open houses. It's great to search online, but there's nothing like walking through the door and feeling and smelling and, whatever the vibes of that home. But go to open houses. That is something. So I'm encouraging buyers, go to open houses and interview realtors before you make a decision who you sign up with. We've talked a lot about already this compensation, and I think I'd like to back up just a little bit. So there is some good news, and the good news is statistics are showing that 70% of the sellers, as they were interviewed, said that they really believe it is important to offer compensation to the buyer agent. Now, in the past, the way everybody has gotten paid, it's always been in the transaction. The buyer brings the money to the table, and the seller pays the professional fees for the listing firm and the buyer firm. And so it came out of the proceeds. So today, maybe some of the sellers are going to not offer to pay compensation, or maybe they're going to offer to pay less compensation than we've previously seen in the past. And of course, compensation, commission, whatever you want to call it, is always negotiable and always has been. A seller could choose at any time not to compensate a buyer agent, but they know that that is detrimental to their ability to sell the property because they need the exposure. If the buyer now has to pay for their professional service from their real estate broker representing them, plus their down payment, plus their closing costs, plus their reserves, plus their inspections, and on, it's going to push a lot of buyers out of the market. In fact, it's going to push most buyers out of the market because people just don't have that kind of cash on hand to be able to do it. So unless we can figure out how to put it back in the transaction, it is definitely going to slow down home purchases because it's just going to push so many people out. First-time home buyers, people with lower cash reserves, military using VA is just pushing them out of the market, which hurts the sellers, hurts home buyers that want to experience the American dream. And so we've got to find some workarounds. So hopefully the seller will continue to offer some compensation. For us to know, we find out two ways. One, we literally call every listing agent or office before a showing and ask that question. Now, if the seller is not compensated and the agent has made that phone call to find out, and the buyer can't afford to pay the compensation, more than likely that appointment is getting canceled. So as a seller, if you've made the decision to list your property and offer no compensation, and you see showing appointments come in and then they get canceled, it's probably because you're offering no compensation, which means the buyer cannot afford to purchase your home. So you've pushed them out of the market, right? So we are encouraging our sellers to offer compensation. I think that's what most real estate firms will do, but who knows? It's independent of what they want to do.
Well, I think what happens, or what is happening, at least initially, things that I've heard in talking to other realtors around the country, and including you and the folks here at Linda Craft Team Realtors, I think one of them is that the seller is anchoring on, I don't have to pay commission. That they're anchoring there.
There are some because they've heard the news, and the news is saying they no longer have to compensate a buyer agent.
Right.
And so there are some that feel that way, which means they need to get educated. Like, what are the consequences of you choosing not to do that?
And that's the question I'm about to go to, is that, okay, I mean, if that's your mentality, you think, okay, I now don't have to pay compensation. What are the consequences for that, or potential consequences?
They just lose a huge segment of the market. I mean, if you said to a buyer, this home is offering to pay my professional fees. This home is not, so you have to pay it. Which home are they going to want to see? Right now, there are some buyers that have plenty of money and they don't care. It's just like if they were hiring a divorce attorney, they expect to pay, etc., for professional service. But a lot of people are not in that position. And so it's definitely going to hurt. The other way, The first question was, how do we know? Well, we know by picking up the phone and making a phone
Right.
call, right? Before we either schedule an appointment or before we schedule, after we've scheduled the appointment, and then we cancel it if it doesn't work for the buyer. The second way to know is you go ahead and show the property, you write up an offer for your buyer, and you include it in a compensation agreement asking the seller to pay the professional fees so it becomes negotiable. And if we do that, that's basically back to what we're doing right now. It's paid in the transaction, right? The seller receives the money and they give some back and pay everything else. So that is the other way.
Which is like asking for closing costs, right?
It is the same thing.
It's
because it is a closing cost now.
Right. Yeah.
It's a new closing
It's
cost
a new
for
closing
buyers.
cost.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
And so we could do it that way, but that wastes a lot of time. And the other thing that it does, if we don't know up front, is as your represented buyer, you really don't want that buyer to be competing with other offers, because you want the buyer to be able to buy the best property at the best price, right? So we would like to have as much information before we ever write an offer, rather than writing an offer, going in blind, adding the compensation agreement, and then they're using that offer to get another offer that's not, or paying a higher price. So we do have to watch out for that as we negotiate as well.
So let's talk about, in the last segment of the show, everything that you've hinted at it, but let's get into the details of what Linda Craft team is doing specifically to, I guess, mitigate this. What's your approach? What's the team's approach to handling this?
We literally have been training on this since March. Creating things such as the one-time showing agreement if someone wants to see one of our properties. We also have an open house disclosure and invitation that talks to everybody that walks through open house about what's happening in NAR and what the new rules are and what our recommendation is for interviewing other agents, hopefully us, but others as well. Buyers just really need to start that process. So education is extremely important within our team and within the community the best that we can.
But let me just say this. I've been to some of these education things, go on for all morning, by the way.
About 3 hours.
It's about 3 hours
a
week, where everybody was going over every form, every line of every form and every detail, and how to think about it, negotiate it, talk about it, what objections may be, et cetera, so forth. The thoroughness that I saw in those 3-hour meetings was not only beneficial to me, but I could see the benefit to prospective
Thank you for that.
Clients as well, because it is really something to see. It is something to be part of that conversation. Just the detail.
Well, every form that we use changed, and we have a lot of forms. Let me just say this. If you are someone right now watching this and you have a home that's listed for sale currently, or that you have signed an exclusive buyer agent representation contract, and you've hired a buyer agent to represent you, in North Carolina, we have a new addendum that you would need to sign that will marry up the old contract before August 17th with the new terms. And basically, it just has a couple of things in it. It says real estate compensation is negotiable. Duh, it always has been. And that we're marrying these two forms together. So if your broker that's representing you has not sent that form to you, maybe you need to pick up the phone and say, hey, I need to sign some stuff and be in compliance.
Let's talk about what you're doing. You talked about encouraging sellers to offer compensation is something that you're doing as well here. Something that, in the meetings as I was in these meetings and talking, one of the points that came up to me, and something that I thought a seller might want to think about if they're, that you're watching the show, is that, sellers become buyers, right? I mean, they do. Sellers become buyers. And the question, that came up is, if I'm a seller who doesn't want to offer commission, then I become a buyer. Do you want your commission paid?
Correct. Or are you going to come up with the cash to pay your own? Or are you going to be willing to settle for maybe half of the properties that are for sale and lose out on maybe some great properties? So
I just thought it was a great point, because sellers do become buyers.
Yeah.
And sometimes we forget that because we sit on that seller side.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always been paid in the transaction. And so now home buyers, please don't ever stop thinking you should buy real estate, because it is still the best investment. I mean, the statistics show that if you're a renter, when you get ready to retire, you will have an average of $6,000 saved. And someone who owns a home has $300,000 saved or more with this great market we've had recently. So you definitely build wealth in real estate. So now we got to figure out how to get you in, because it's already been a stretch with all the closing costs and everything else you need to purchase. I mean, it's not cheap to buy a home. You know, you're putting your money into it. And even though there are some great programs with 100% financing, you still have to have some money to be able to buy a home. So how are we going to do this? You need buyer representation. In fact, the surveys also show that most buyers say they want someone to shepherd them through the transaction. They don't know what they're doing. They need help. So don't sacrifice the help that you need to think you're going to save a little money by being unrepresented. That would be a dangerous thing for you to do, because the seller is going to be represented by a professional that knows how to negotiate. So you don't want to be unrepresented. So then how do you get the money? So let's go over some of the ways that we could come up with this compensation. The first is, if you have the money, you literally can pay the buyer compensation yourself. If the seller is offering compensation, then we just reduce the price or switch it over or whatever. But you have that option. If you don't have the money, then perhaps the seller would pay some of the compensation and you would pay a portion of it as well, so that we could do it that way. Another way that you might be able to do it is if you're putting down a down payment, and most people are 3, 5, 20, whatever, you put down less of a down payment and you take that extra cash that you have to put it towards the closing costs that you're going to need. And you would work with your mortgage professional, which we'd be happy to refer you to one, a great one or two. If that is an option as well. So either the buyer pays, the seller pays, the buyer and seller share the payment, the down payment is reduced, or the other way, which I mentioned earlier, is that you present an offer and you ask for the seller to compensate based on the strength of your offer. So they're paying all the compensation to both parties based on the strength of your offer. And that puts it right back into being paid by the transaction again. The seller's not writing a check because you brought the money, Mr. Buyer, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. Seller's not writing a check. The buyer's not writing a check because the lender actually provided the money to the transaction. And now everybody is being paid. So there are some creative ways to work through this.
Let me ask you a question. Is it possible for the buyer to maybe increase the price?
It is, as long as the home will appraise, which is why you need a professional real estate broker representing you that knows how to actually look at such things to see if it can support it. But yes, you could raise the price and an offer to compensate my broker addendum with it and present the offer that way. So that when I say strength of the offer, that's what I mean. You're not going to be able to come in below asking price and ask him to pay all kinds of things for you, at least not in this market. Now, if the market shifts and it becomes more of a seller's market, meaning there's so many buyers that want to buy and very few homes for sale, that's one market. The other market is there's so many homes for sale and there's very few buyers. And when that happens, the seller is going to want to reduce the price. The seller is going to want to pay your closing costs. The seller is going to want to help you get in. But in the market we've been in for many, many years and are probably going to be in this market for quite some time because of the housing shortage, it's going to have to be a strong offer to the seller in order to get them to want to pay your additional closing cost.
All right. Well, we've done our time. A lot of information. Tons of information and a lot more to learn. If people who are listening, watching from everywhere, and they want to go, hey, I need to learn more about this settlement and what this really means, what's the best way to get a hold of you or the team?
Yeah, I would just love for you to go to lendercraft.com. It is such a wealth of resources for you if you are buying or selling to learn about just to learn everything about real estate. So I would encourage you to go to lendercraft.com. And of course, through that website, you can contact this team. I would really encourage you to schedule an appointment. Let's have a consultation. Let's talk about your needs and how to help you achieve those goals. get educated. That is what everybody needs
Mhm.
more than anything.
Totally agree. Thanks, Linda, for coming on. It's great to have you back on. Folks, it's the show. You know what I say to you every week? You know what? You've got a lot of choices. You chose us. Thank you so much. Also, listen, give us a thumbs up YouTube, 5-star review, wherever you're listening to the show. Make it a great review. We really love those. Those are awesome, right? And as I say to you all over, you know what that is. Ciao, everybody.